Welcome to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Education Board.
Hello students, welcome to TV learning programs. I'm teacher Julius as usual, and today I'll be with senior 4 students who do economics. So our today's lesson, it is supply, law of supply, and factors determining the supply of a commodity. So in the previous unit that we talked about, which was the theory of demand, we saw many things. Factors that determine quantity demanded of a commodity, the law of supply, the supply curve, linear, non-linear demand curves, the individual demand schedule, and the market schedule. So now, in our today's new unit, which is the theory of supply, our first lesson will be about the supply. We shall explain what supply is, and I expect even at the end of the lesson to know what the law of supply states, what it means, how you can even illustrate it on the supply curve, and explaining the factors that influence or that determine the supply of a commodity. So, learners, I expect you by the end of this lesson to be able to know all these three concepts, knowing what is supply, explaining what supply is, stating the law of supply, and illustrating it on a supply curve, and being able to explain or describe the factors influencing or determining the supply of a given commodity or quantity supplied. So let's now go on. So what is supply? We are defining supply as the amount of goods and services that sellers or producers are willing to take to the market at a given price in a given period of time. So the amount of commodities, amount of goods and services, the amount of a product, the quantity that sellers or producers are willing to offer to take to the market at a given price in a given period of time. That is what you call supply. That is what you call supply. So now, how does the law of supply state? How does it state? So the law of supply states that the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied, and the lower the price, the lower the quantity supplied. Ceteris paribus, so keeping other factors constant. So what does this one mean? It means that at a higher price, producers or sellers are willing to offer or to take or to supply more of the commodity at the market. And when the price reduces, then they supply less to the market. So quantity supplied will be less or will be reduced by the suppliers, because a low price or a lower price is not attractive enough to attract suppliers or to make sellers take more on the market. So, but when the price is very high, then they are attracted to take, or they become even very happy, and then they take more on the market. So the higher the price of a commodity, the higher the quantity supplied. And the lower the price of the commodity, the lower the quantity supplied. So that is how the law of supply states. You can illustrate this on the supply curve. So the supply curve now, it has a positive slope. It has a positive slope. It has a positive slope. If this is maybe quantity supplied, if on the x-axis we have quantity supplied, maybe in kilograms, it can be in kilograms. Then on this we have our price. We have our price, maybe it can be in Rwandan francs, it can be in US dollars. So, assume maybe at price 1, at price P1, then producers are willing to supply maybe quantity 1. Then the price has increased. If the price increases from price 1 and maybe to price P2, then we expect producers, we expect sellers to supply more to the market. So what will happen now? Maybe in this case, they are willing to supply or to increase the quantity taken to the market, maybe quantity 2. So even you can continue, if it continues rising, if the price continues rising, to price P3, we expect more quantity to be added or to be supplied on the market. So in this case, we shall find that our supply curve has got what we call a positive slope, So this is a simple illustration of the supply curve, which signifies or which explains the law of supply. As the price of the commodity increases, more of it is taken to the market. Suppliers are willing to supply more to the market at a higher price than at the raw market. Because if the price reduces, then they will supply less. They get less motivation to take more to the market. So you can see, as the price increases, then they are willing to take more to the market. So quantity supplied increases. So this explains, or this is a supply curve that explains the law of supply. So then it has a positive slope, meaning that there is a direct relationship. There's a direct relationship between quantity supplied and price. Now you should compare with the demand, with the demand curve, whereby there is an inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded. Here, the relationship is proportional. It's very direct, because as price increases, quantity supplied increases. As price falls, quantity supplied also falls. But now in demand, what we talked about, price increases, quantity demanded reduces, price falls, quantity demanded increases. Inverse relationship. That's why in the demand curve, it has a supply. We saw a negative slope, But here we have a positive slope. There is a direct relationship between these two variables, price and quantity supplied, So this is the supply curve. So this is our supply curve, which explains the law of supply. So let's continue, and we look at factors that determine supply. There are many factors that we have that influence or that affect supply. One is price of the commodity. As you can see, price of the commodity. So how does this one influence or affect quantity supplied? So when you're explaining these factors, try to look at the two sides. So when the price increases, or when the price is high, and when the price lowers, or when the price is low, what happens to the quantity supplied? So the higher price, or when the price of the commodity increases, its supply on the market also increases. Or producers are willing to supply more on the market. But when the price now falls, then low quantity will be supplied on the market. So the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. And the lower the price, the lower the quantity supplied. So the price of the commodity influences what producers take on the market. So it is a really very big factor. Then we have price of competitively supplied products. We have price of competitively supplied products. How does this one influence the supply of a commodity? How does this one affect the supply of a commodity? So prices of related commodities affect the quantity supplied of a commodity, because producers tend to divert resources to commodities which become more attractive to produce. For example, now, let's give an example. Price of competitively supplied products. Products which may be produced using the same resources, or which may require same factors of production to produce. For example, now, let's talk about a factor of production like land. If you have land, and maybe on this land, you use it, it is maybe 1 acre to grow beans and maybe maize. These are two products which you want to produce using this factor of production, land, and maybe using some labor. These two factors of production, land and labor. So now, you are using same resources to produce these products. So if, meaning that they are competing. So if now there is an increase in price of beans, if there is an increase in price of beans, because we are saying price of competitively supplied products. If there is an increase in price of beans, there have been an increase in price of beans. That means more resources or producers here or sellers will divert the resources to production of beans because it is more profitable or it is more attractive to produce beans than producing maize. So the supply of maize will reduce and the supply of beans will increase. Simply because it is profitable, the price of beans have increased, and therefore it is profitable when you invest in production of beans than investing in production of maize. So here now, the supply of maize will reduce, while the supply of beans will increase on the market. So that is price of competitively supplied product. So resources here will be channeled to the production of this commodity, which is attractive or whose price have increased. So the supply of maize on the market will reduce because more resources will be diverted. The diversion of resources. Resources are diverted to the production of more beans because it is attractive or its price have increased. So the supply of maize will reduce, the supply of beans will increase. So that is price of competitively supplied products. Then we have price of jointly supplied product. We have joint supply. Joint supply. These are products that are produced together. Joint supplied products. Products which are produced together. What are those products that are produced together? Take an example, beef and hides. They are not supplied together. They are produced together. Beef and hides. Because the production of beef reduces the production of hides. They are produced together. Joint supply. So in this case now, what affects beef will eventually or will finally have an effect on the supply or on the production of hides. So now let's look at the price of jointly supplied products. Assume now there have been an increase in the price of beef, or it is profitable to produce, or to invest in beef. It is profitable to produce beef. That means more sellers, more beef will be produced. If more beef is produced, because maybe it is profitable to invest in beef, then it means that will lead to an increase in supply of hides. An increase in supply of hides. If more beef is supplied, then there will be more hides supplied. But if less beef is supplied, then there will be low or maybe less hides will be supplied. So, when the price of beef increases, that means more beef is supplied, which in turn increases the supply of hides and vice versa. In other words, when the price of beef reduces, for beef, that means less beef will be supplied, and therefore less hides will be supplied. So the price of beef affects the supply of hides, price of joint supplied products. Joint supply, we look at products which are produced together, like beef and hides. One affects the other. Then we have costs of production. So when you talk about costs of production, we look at the factors of production. You know the factors of production. Where we have land, where we have capital, and where we have labor and entrepreneur. the 4 factors of production and the entrepreneur. Who organizes all these factors of production? The 3 factors of production. So now, when it's very expensive or when the prices of these factors of production, majorly these ones, when it is very expensive, when it is costly to acquire these factors of production, this will reduce the supply of goods and services. Take an example maybe. When we look at this capital, maybe it is very expensive. The interest rate is very high to acquire capital to invest in production of goods. The interest rates are very high. You cannot therefore acquire a loan from the bank to invest in the production of goods. You cannot get land. You can't get money to lease land. It is very expensive to acquire or to get labor, to get human resources, employees, to hire them to produce certain goods. So this will reduce the supply of goods and services. But when it is cheap, when the costs or when the prices for these factors of production are very low, that will increase the supply of goods because it becomes cheaper to acquire these factors of production and invest in the production of goods, hence increasing the supply of goods and services. So that's how that factor of cost of production influences the supply or the quantity supplied of a given commodity. When it is very expensive or costly to acquire these, that will reduce supply of goods. Then we have other factors like the level of technology. Level of technology. If we use advanced and efficient technology in production of goods and services, it will increase the supply. So, but when you use poor technology, the technology which is traditional, it may not stimulate or increase the supply of goods and services. So use of advanced and efficient technology in production increases the supply of goods and services than when you use poor technology that is inefficient and ineffective. That will reduce the supply of goods and services. Then we have, you can talk about, we have many factors like government policy. So this affects, government policy affects the supply of goods and services, government policies. Now, if the government policies is favorable, maybe there is some subsidization, low taxation on the production of given goods. That will increase the supply of such a product. But now if the government policy, if a government puts what you call a total ban, it puts a ban on the production of a given commodity, that means its supply will be zero. Its supply will be zero. If a government puts a total ban on the production on the supply of a commodity, its supply reduces to zero. So government policies or government policy affects, determines the supply of goods and services. If there is subsidization, if government policies are favorable, like reduced taxation, subsidization, maybe the government provides free land for production of a given commodity, that will increase its supply. But if the government policies are favorable, for example, it imposes maybe a total ban on the supply of a given commodity, its supply reduces to zero. So that's how government policy affects or determines quantity supplied. Then we have gestation period, time of maturity. When you talk about gestation period. How long does a commodity take to mature? How long does a commodity take to be ready for consumption? Gestation period. So if a shorter gestation period will increase the supply of a commodity. So let's talk about maybe the agriculture sector. I want you to compare two things, two commodities here, two crops. Compare cassava and maybe compare beans. Which one takes longer to mature or to be ready? So you'll find that cassava takes long period for it to be ready. The cassava takes a long period to be ready. So meaning that you cannot easily increase its supply compared to beans. So with beans, or a commodity that takes a short gestation period, then its supply increases in the short run. You can increase the supply of beans in the short run, but increasing the supply of cassava in the short run, it is impossible because the gestation period, or it takes long to be ready or to mature. So gestation period influences, determines, or affects quantity supplied. Then we have seasonal changes. We have seasonal changes. We have seasonal changes. Seasonal changes. Seasonal changes. So this influences both supply and demand, this factor, seasonal factors. Now, for example, now, if we can look at this example, compare maybe in dry seasons. You may not easily increase, in dry seasons, you may not easily increase the supply of vegetables because the conditions, the prevailing conditions don't favor the growth of vegetables. So unfavorable seasonal changes, like during dry seasons, may not increase the supply of certain goods. For example, now if we talk about vegetables, you may not increase their supply in the dry seasons or in hot seasons because the season changes, the conditions available are unfavorable. But now, favorable changes, maybe in wet season, or maybe the conditions available are very okay, it may favor or it may increase the supply of certain products. May increase the supply of certain products. Then we have objective of the farm, also as another factor, objectives of the farm. You know what a farm means, objectives of the objective of the farm. Farm is a production unit under one management. It is a production unit. So in this case now, a farm has many objectives. It has many objectives. We shall talk about only two objectives. The profit maximization, if it has an objective of maximizing profits, and if it has an objective of maximizing sales. I want you to look at two. Maximizing sale as an objective, maximizing sales maximization goal, objective. Maximizing sales and maximizing profits. Maximizing sales and maximizing profits. If the farm, or if the objective of the farm, if it has an objective of maximizing sales, selling a lot of things, that's what it means. That means the supply of goods will have to increase. It supplies, it produces and supplies a lot. Because its objective, or its goal, is to sell a lot of things. Sales maximization. But now if it has an objective, if it has a goal of maximizing profits, then it must produce and supply less to create a condition of scarcity, situation of scarcity. It must produce less and supplies less to the market, such that it charges high prices and maximizes profits. So that's how these two objectives will determine the quantity supplied of a commodity by the farm. If a farm has a sales maximization goal objective, it will increase the supply. But if the objective of the farm is to maximize profits, it will supply less. It will supply less to the market. So you can see different factors, how they influence, how they determine quantity supplied of a commodity to the market. So you should be able to explain them in two ways, because we are saying factors that determine. Now you should be able to think of two questions in this case. If they tell you to describe the factors that limit, factors that may hinder quantity supplied on the market, factors that may lead to an increase, maybe factors that may lead to an increase in quantity supplied, factors that may lead to an increase, that may lead to an increase, that may lead to an increase, that may lead to an increase in quantity supplied of a commodity, in quantity supplied of a commodity. So in this case, you have to state your points in a positive way. You have to state your points in a positive way. What factors may lead to an increase? Not factors that determine, factors that may lead to an increase. So you have to state them very well. Favorable changes, favorable government policies, maybe high price of the commodity or increase in the price of the commodity. So using advanced technology or use of advanced technology, so you have to state those points very well in a positive way. So before we come to the end of our lesson, I have two questions that I want you to work out. Explain the role of supply using a supply curve. And question 2, describe the factors that influence the amount of commodity put on the market by producers. Those two questions, I hope by the end of this lesson you are able to answer them very well. Thank you very much for listening and watching today's lesson. We meet next time. Bye-bye.